Good afternoon, everyone. This afternoon, I'm going to share something special to me. I'm going to convince you that bonding is in your forehead. In the next few minutes, I hope you would understand what I truly mean by my statement. Bonding is in your forehead. It was the very afternoon right after my final exam. Everyone was happy. I was happy. And while everyone was eating and drinking for snacks, somehow I sat in one corner of the room and spoke to Jesus silently, saying, "So, Lord, now my mission is accomplished." And I seemed to hear him saying something to me. Mm-hmm. Just make sure you don't miss my point. 4 years before, I flew to Germany to study in Ottovan Gericke University of Magdeburg for the degree Natural of Science, major in developmental neurobiology. Magdeburg is 1 hour drive away from Berlin. The German government chose me that year to be one of the two scholars for the doctoral degree. And I was excited, of course. I just didn't realize the difficulty of the subject. I had no background in neurobiology because there's none in the Philippines. And I was in big trouble. I remember the very first day I met my professor, and I went inside the room full of pictures. Pictures of brain cells all over the place, and I was blown away. And all the more I fell in love with the brain cells. And my professor really asked me several questions like, is forehead truly emotional? By the way, I was in the neurobiology lab, developmental neurobiology lab, studying the impact of emotional stress during the early development. And she asked me these questions. If the forehead is truly emotional, then you have to answer whether infant brains are already emotional. In other words, are we emotional right from the start? And if so, then how does the forehead, the infant forehead, respond to emotional stress like separation? And she said, well, because neurons are widely studied, so you better study another kind of cell, that's the astrocytes. Astro means stars. They are the nursing cells of neurons. Neurons cannot live without the astrocytes because they deliver glucose to the neurons. And previous studies show that those rats which were exposed to enriched environment, meaning they have everything that they need for their development, they're able to socialize with their family and other rats, really have strong neurons. They have increased number in neurons in their foreheads, and the neurons have better connections than those that are left in the impoverished condition. And I said, "Oh, well, I have to study that. I had no background in neurobiology." You see, infants really learn the life lifelong attachment with their mother during the first 3 years of life. During this critical time window, the child is trying to learn how to bond with other people later. If he is able to learn to bond with his own mother. So these 3 years of life, infancy, is very, very important. And when this time window is being disturbed, like there's gonna be separation between the mom and the child during this stage, then there's gonna be a problem on the interpersonal relationships of the individual on the latter part of life. And they call this social emotional behavior of the individual. And so I went on to figuring out which animal models I'm going to use in order to mimic this scenario in human behavior. And I remember how I mercilessly but reluctantly, of course, separate pups from their moms. And of course, I had to gouge their brains and slice them and process them in order to get my degree for the sake of science. Interestingly, I jumped off my feet the first time I saw brain cells under the microscope, especially the astrocytes. They are like beauty queens, in parade during the beauty pageant, telling me or displaying to me they are very beautiful. And I said, who? If God could make these brain cells beautiful, He has no reason not to make me beautiful. And all the more I fell in love, with brain cells. And my studies show that separation is very detrimental to the developing forehead. Separations, both single as well as repeated separations, are very damaging. They damage the cell, they burst the cell, and they make the brain cells stunted. And these damaged cells never recover to have intact cell bodies again or defined projections. One time separation, when pups are separated only for one time during the infancy period, they get their foreheads or their brain cells really shorten and lessen the branches, particularly on astrocytes. But the good news is when they return back to the cage to be with mom again, then stunted astrocytes really grow again as if nothing happened, as if their foreheads are never separated from the mother. Also, brain cells try to cope during stress, especially cells on the forehead. Well, during the separation, repeated separation, astrocytes seem to look like those are not separated from the mom, but the stress hormone that affects them really have a long-term impact. When pups go back to the cage to be with mom again, then you will see that their cells really get stunted and never they recover. So these results simply showed me that the forehead is truly emotional and it responds to emotional stimulations. and separation is detrimental to a developing forehead. And then all of a sudden, like a lightning flash, the voltage really hit me like so hard. And I said, oh wow, this is the reason why God will mark his people by their forehead. The reason for that is God will see whether or not these people have an attachment with him. In Revelation 6:11 and Revelation 7:3, God is telling the marking angel by saying, wait a little longer until your fellow servants and brethren shall be fulfilled. Do not harm the land or sea or trees till we have sealed the servants of God in their foreheads, indicating that God is identifying his people by their foreheads. Whether these foreheads are attached, emotionally involved with him or not. What kind of involvement, what kind of attachment do we expect to have with Jesus? Interestingly, David elaborates this in Psalm 42, 1 and 2, and describes it beautifully by saying, as the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. Am I really panting for the presence of God in my life? Am I thirsting for him? In the last days, there are going to be only two groups of people on planet Earth. One group who loves Jesus, and the other group who does not love Jesus. And so, this group does not worship God, but worship someone else. And both groups, whether this group loves God and this group does not love God, will all be identified by their foreheads. The group who loves Jesus will see his face. The reason for that is his name is on the forehead. The name that is above all name, Jesus. They acknowledge to have saved them from all their sins. And what is important for this group of people is just to see him. And so they are very determined to see him. His name occupies their forehead. They want to see him because they have fallen so hard for him, because he first loved them, and because Jesus lives in heaven, they're gonna see him there. And because Jesus lives in heaven, they're gonna live with him there. There's no important place for this group of people who love Jesus but to be with him. And because Jesus is in heaven, they want to go to heaven to be with him. This group of people have fallen in love with Jesus. They are madly in love with Jesus. And they will do everything they could to see Jesus, to be with Jesus, to live with Jesus. And this group of people, John saw in his vision, and he describes it this way. Then I looked, and there before me was the Lamb, standing on the Mount Zion, and with him these people, 144 of them, who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads. These people have decided for God because they are madly in love with Him. They have an emotional attachment with Him. I remember those times when preachers told me that yes, forehead is for decision making. Yes, it is. Forehead is for rational thinking. Yes, it is. But my studies show that rational thinking as well as decision making are just the product or the results of an emotional involvement with something or someone you are deciding for. I went to Germany to study neurobiology. God sent me there to enhance my spirituality. I studied the forehead for the sake of the degree, but God let me see and investigate the forehead to prove to me that it is the brain region for intimacy, especially intimacy with God. Do you love Jesus? I love Jesus. I want to love Him more. This is the promise that He gives you today so that you would really fall in love with Him. It is found in Isaiah 49:15 saying, can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has borne? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. You will love Jesus if you have experienced, and if you will experience Him, how much He loves you so. So I hope you have learned something important this afternoon. I hope I have proven my argument to you that bonding is in the brain and being emotionally involved is in your forehead, particularly. Thank you for listening. Happy Sabbath.